Mr. David was known in the city as a quiet billionaire. He owned many businesses, from hotels to factories, yet most people never saw him in public. He lived in a wide mansion at the edge of town, surrounded by tall walls and guarded gates. To many, he seemed untouchable, a man who had everything and needed nothing. But David carried a secret in his heart. He did not trust people easily, not even those who worked inside his house. Among the workers in his mansion, there was a maid named Anna. She was not old, but her face showed the lines of struggle. Life had not been kind to her. She had come from a poor neighborhood and had to raise her young son alone. David had hired her 6 months ago after she begged for the job. She had no experience working in a mansion, but her eyes had carried honesty, and he allowed her to stay. Still, doubt always sat in David's mind. He wondered what people did when they thought he was not watching. Did they work honestly? Did they treat his home with respect? Or did they take advantage of him? One evening, as the sun was sinking behind the hills, David decided to test Anna. He told the staff he would be resting early, then retired to his bedroom. But he did not sleep. Instead, he lay still with his eyes closed, breathing slowly, pretending to rest. He wanted to see what the maid would do when she thought the master of the house was asleep. Minutes passed in silence. The big clock in the hall ticked softly. Outside, the sound of crickets filled the garden. Then David heard the quiet creak of the door. It opened carefully, as if someone did not wish to disturb him. Light footsteps touched the carpet. He remained still, though his heart quickened. It was Anna. She stepped into the room, holding a small tray. On it was a glass of water and a folded cloth. Her eyes were gentle as she placed the tray on the table near his bed. She stood still for a moment, looking at him, then slowly lowered her head. David expected her to search through his things or take something from his desk. Instead, she did something that froze him in place. She knelt beside his bed and began to whisper. "God, please give my son a better life than mine," she said softly. "Help me keep this job so I can feed him. And if this man, my master, ever feels lonely, give him peace. He has everything, but maybe his heart is still empty." David almost opened his eyes in shock. She was not here to steal or betray him. She was here to pray. She prayed not only for her son but also for him, the master who doubted her. Anna wiped her eyes quickly and placed the cloth on the table. She stood up, straightened her dress, and looked around the room. Instead of touching his belongings, she adjusted the curtains so the moonlight would not disturb him. She even picked up a book that had fallen near his chair and placed it carefully back on the shelf. David could not believe what he was seeing. All his life, people had wanted something from him. They wanted money, power, or influence. But this maid, this woman with so little in her hands, wanted nothing from him. Instead, she gave kindness in secret, with no thought of reward. When she finally left the room, David opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. His chest felt heavy. For the first time in many years, he felt guilty. He had tested her, expecting dishonesty, but instead he discovered a heart far purer than his own doubts. As the night deepened, David could not sleep. He thought about the way she prayed for her child and even for him. He wondered what struggles she faced every day, raising a boy alone with little money. He wondered if she had eaten dinner or given her share to her son. In that moment, David realized something he had never thought before. Riches could fill a house, but they could not fill a heart. Kindness and sincerity were treasures greater than gold. And Anna, the maid he had once doubted, carried those treasures quietly in her spirit. The test he had planned to measure her loyalty ended up testing his own humanity. And he was not sure he had passed. David turned on his side and closed his eyes once more, but not to pretend. This time, he closed them because the weight of his thoughts was too much. Tomorrow, he would have to face her, and he would no longer look at her the same way again. That night, for the first time in years, the billionaire felt small. The next morning sunlight slipped through the tall windows of the mansion. Birds sang outside, and the servants moved about quietly, preparing breakfast and tidying the halls. Yet inside his room, David lay awake long before dawn. He had not slept well. The memory of Anna kneeling by his bed, whispering prayers for her son and even for him, repeated in his mind. He rose slowly, dressed in a plain shirt instead of his usual sharp suit, and walked into the hall. The staff greeted him carefully, as they always did. Some looked nervous, others overly polite. But his eyes searched only for one person. He found Anna in the dining room. She was polishing the long wooden table, her hands moving with care. Her face looked tired, but she hummed a soft tune as she worked, as if music gave her strength. At her side lay a small cloth bag, patched in many places, where she carried her lunch from home. "Good morning, sir," Anna said quickly when she noticed him. She straightened, bowed her head, and held her hands together nervously. David studied her for a moment, but he did not mention the night before. He did not tell her that he had been awake and listening. Instead, he sat at the head of the table and said calmly, "Bring me tea." "Yes, sir," she answered and hurried away. As she left, David's eyes fell on the bag she had left behind. Curiosity pushed him, though he rarely allowed himself to touch the belongings of his staff. He opened the bag quietly. Inside was a folded piece of bread, an apple, and a small notebook. The bread was dry, the apple bruised. He frowned. This was all she brought for herself in a mansion filled with food. He picked up the notebook. On the cover were scribbled words in a child's handwriting, "For Mama." He opened it and saw short notes, drawings, and simple poems written in uneven letters. It was the work of her son. On one page was a drawing of a stick figure woman with a big smile, holding hands with a smaller stick figure boy. Below it were the words, "Mama is my hero." David closed the notebook gently and placed it back inside the bag. For the first time, he felt his throat tighten. All his money, all his luxury, and yet he had never been called someone's hero with such pure love. When Anna returned with the tea, she looked surprised to see him staring out the window rather than reading the morning paper as usual. He took the tea without a word and nodded. She bowed slightly and returned to her work, unaware of what he had just discovered. Later that day, David called his manager, Mr. Lee, into his study. "I want you to tell me everything about the maid, Anna," he ordered. Mr. Lee hesitated, then said, "She lives in the old part of town, sir. A very small place. Her husband passed away years ago, and she raises her boy alone. She never complains, but I hear she works extra jobs at night when she leaves here. Sometimes she cleans small shops just to buy school books for her child." David leaned back in his chair, silent. The more he heard, the heavier his chest felt. He had spent his life protecting his wealth from greedy hands, but here was a woman who asked for nothing yet gave all she had for her son. That evening, while walking through the garden, David saw Anna again. She was carrying laundry, her arms full of clean sheets. The wind caught one and pulled it from her grip, sending it across the grass. She chased after it quickly, laughing softly at her own clumsiness. For the first time, David noticed the light in her face. Even in hardship, she carried joy. "Anna," he called. She stopped, startled, and turned to him. "Yes, sir." He walked closer. "How old is your son?" Her eyes brightened at the mention of her child. "He is 7, sir. His name is Sam. He is very smart. He loves to draw." David nodded slowly. "Do you bring him to the mansion sometimes?" Her smile faded, and she shook her head. "No, sir. I would never disturb your home. This is my workplace, not his playground." David looked at her carefully. Perhaps one day you should bring him. I would like to meet him. Anna's eyes widened. Are you certain, sir? Yes, David said firmly. I am certain. She bowed her head, her hands trembling slightly as she held the sheets. Thank you, sir. He will be so happy to know you allowed it. As David walked away, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had never cared to know the families of his workers. To him, they were employees, nothing more. Yet now, he wanted to see the boy who called his mother a hero. He wanted to understand how such love could grow in a house of poverty while he, surrounded by riches, felt so empty. That night, David stood again in his room, staring at the moon through the open curtains. He remembered the prayer she had whispered, the little notebook filled with a child's love, and her simple joy even when life was hard. For the first time in years, he looked forward to the next day. He wanted to see more. And deep inside, he began to wonder if this maid and her son would change the way he saw the world forever. 2 days later, the mansion felt different. The staff moved with more energy, whispering about something unusual. The news had spread quickly. The master had asked the maid to bring her child. Nobody could remember such a request before. Anna prepared nervously from the moment she woke. She dressed her son, Sam, in his cleanest clothes. His shirt was a little big, his shoes a little old, but his smile was bright. He carried the same notebook David had seen earlier, tucked under his arm with pride. Remember, Sam, Anna whispered as they stood at the mansion gate, be polite. This is not our house. Speak with respect. Yes, Mama, Sam said, nodding eagerly. His wide eyes sparkled with excitement. When they entered, the guards looked curious but said nothing. Inside the mansion, the hall seemed larger than ever to the boy. He clutched his mother's hand tightly, staring at the tall ceilings and shining floors. David was waiting in the sitting room. He wore a simple gray suit, not as sharp as usual, but his presence still carried weight. When he saw the boy step inside, he stood. This must be Sam, David said slowly. Yes, sir, Anna replied, bowing her head slightly. Her voice trembled. Thank you for allowing me to bring him. Sam looked up at the tall man before him. He did not look afraid. Instead, he smiled and said, Hello, sir. My name is Sam. David felt something stir inside him. So many adults bowed, scraped, or tried to impress him, yet this child looked at him with simple honesty. He bent slightly and held out his hand. Hello, Sam. The boy shook his hand firmly, his little fingers gripping with confidence. Then, without hesitation, he opened his notebook. I draw things. Do you want to see? David blinked. No one had ever spoken to him so directly in his own mansion. Yes, he said after a pause. Show me. Sam flipped through the pages. There were drawings of houses, trees, animals, and stick figures of him and his mother. He pointed to one where he had drawn a small house with smoke rising from the chimney. That's our home, he explained proudly. It's small, but Mama makes it warm. David studied the page. The drawing was simple, but it carried love. He glanced at Anna, who stood quietly with her hands folded, her cheeks slightly red. You are very talented, David told the boy. Sam grinned. One day I will draw big buildings like this mansion. Maybe I will be an architect. David's lips curved in the smallest smile. That is a fine dream. For the rest of the morning, David allowed the boy to explore parts of the mansion. Sam walked through the garden, pointing at flowers and asking questions. He marveled at the tall library, running his fingers across the rows of books. Anna followed closely, nervous that her son might disturb something, but David watched calmly, almost amused. At one point, Sam looked up at David and asked, Do you live here all alone? The question was innocent, yet it struck David deeply. He hesitated, then answered softly, "Yes, I live here alone." Sam frowned. "That must be very quiet. Mama says a house is not a home without laughter." Anna quickly hushed her son, whispering, "Sam, do not say such things." But David raised his hand gently. "It is all right. He speaks the truth." For the first time in many years, David realized how empty the vast mansion truly was. Beautiful walls, expensive art, golden lights, yet silence filled every corner. Later, in the dining hall, David asked Anna and Sam to join him for a small meal. Anna tried to refuse, but he insisted. Plates of fresh bread, fruit, and warm soup were brought to the table. Sam's eyes widened at the food, though he tried to remain polite. "Eat," David said kindly. Sam looked to his mother for permission, and when she nodded, he began to eat happily. David watched him, noticing how the boy took small bites and glanced at his mother often, as if making sure she ate enough too. When the meal was done, Sam leaned against his mother's arm, satisfied. David sat back in his chair, quiet. A strange thought entered his mind: this boy had given him more warmth in a few hours than many adults had given him in years. As the afternoon light faded, Anna prepared to leave with her son. She thanked David with deep respect, but he stopped her at the door. "Anna," he said firmly. "From now on, your son will have all the books and supplies he needs. I will arrange it. He will not struggle to learn." Anna's eyes widened, her lips trembling. "Sir, I cannot accept you will," David interrupted gently. "Consider it not a gift, but an investment. I believe your son has a bright future." Tears filled Anna's eyes, but she bowed low and whispered, "Thank you, sir." As she led Sam out of the mansion, the boy turned back and waved. "Goodbye, sir. I'll bring you another drawing next time." David stood still as the heavy door closed. The hall grew silent again, but his heart did not feel as heavy. For the first time, he looked forward to the sound of footsteps returning. That night, as he sat alone in his study, David realized the truth of the boy's words. His mansion was large, but it had never been a home. And somehow, in just a single day, a maid's child had shown him what it meant to fill a house with laughter. The following week, the mansion seemed brighter. For years, it had been a place of silence where servants moved quickly, speaking only when needed. But now, there was a new energy in the air. The staff whispered about the change in their master. David, once cold and distant, now looked more thoughtful. He still carried himself with authority, but his eyes no longer seemed as empty. The reason was clear. It was because of Anna and her son. True to his word, David had arranged for Sam to receive books, pencils, and art supplies. When the boxes arrived at Anna's small house, she could hardly believe it. Sam opened them with excitement, his eyes glowing as he touched each item. "Mama, look! Real sketchbooks! And so many colors," he shouted. Anna's eyes filled with tears. "We must thank the master properly," she whispered. And so, the next Sunday, she brought Sam again to the mansion. This time, David was waiting outside in the garden. The boy ran to him without fear and held up a new drawing. "I made this for you." David took the paper carefully. It was a picture of the mansion, but with flowers blooming brighter and birds flying above it. At the center stood three stick figures, a tall man, a woman, and a boy. David froze for a moment. "Who is this?" he asked, pointing at the figures. "That's you, Mama, and me," Sam explained cheerfully. "Because now you're not alone anymore." David felt something inside him soften. He folded the drawing neatly and placed it in his coat pocket. "Thank you, Sam. I will keep it safe." From that day on, Sam became a frequent visitor. Sometimes Anna brought him after work, and sometimes David himself asked to see him. The boys' laughter filled the halls that had once known only silence. The servants noticed, whispering to each other, but none dared question it. One afternoon, David showed Sam the library. The boy's eyes widened at the endless rows of books. "Can I really read any of these?" he asked. "Yes," David replied. "Knowledge is a treasure. It is here for you." Sam picked a book of architecture, filled with tall buildings and bridges. He sat on the floor, flipping through the pages with excitement. Anna stood at the doorway, her heart swelling with pride. She had never imagined her son would sit in a grand library, welcomed by a man as powerful as David. Later that evening, David walked Anna to the gate as she prepared to leave with her son. He looked at her quietly before speaking. "You have raised a fine boy. Despite your hardships, he carries hope in his heart. That is a gift not every parent can give." Anna lowered her eyes humbly. "I only try my best, sir. He is all I have." David nodded. "And perhaps he is all you need." That night, David could not sleep. He sat at his desk, staring at the drawing Sam had given him. He thought of the boy's words, "Now you're not alone anymore." The truth of that struck him deeply. For years, he had surrounded himself with wealth, but he had lived in loneliness. Now, in the laughter of a child and the quiet strength of a maid, he had found something money could never buy. Days turned into weeks. David began to spend more time with Anna and Sam. He asked about their life, their struggles, their dreams. Slowly, Anna's nervousness faded. She still respected him as her master, but she no longer trembled in his presence. Instead, she spoke with honesty, telling him stories of her son's childhood, of nights when she had gone hungry so Sam could eat, of the long hours she worked cleaning small shops. David listened carefully, each word carving itself into his mind. He had always believed trust was rare, that people only sought his wealth. Yet here was a woman who had never asked for more than her wages, who gave her heart fully to her child without complaint. One evening, while sitting in the garden, Sam asked David, "Sir, do you ever feel sad?" David was caught off guard. He looked at the boy, whose innocent eyes waited for an answer. After a long pause, he admitted, "Yes. Many times." "Then you should come to our house," Sam said brightly. "It's small, but Mama makes the best soup. And we can laugh together. That way you won't be sad." Anna gasped softly and placed her hand on her son's shoulder. "Sam, do not trouble the master." But David raised his hand. "No, Anna. He is right." For the first time in his life, David considered stepping outside his walls, not for business, not for power, but for something simple: human warmth. As the sun set behind the mansion, painting the sky in gold, David realized the bond was growing stronger. He had tested Anna once, doubting her honesty. But in the end, it was she and her son who had tested him, showing him the meaning of kindness, trust, and family. And slowly, without knowing it, the billionaire's guarded heart began to open. The invitation came quietly. One evening, after Anna had finished her work, David said, "Tomorrow, I wish to visit your home." Anna froze. She looked at him with wide eyes, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Sir, my home is very small. It is not fit for you." But David's voice was calm. "I am not seeking comfort. I only wish to see where you and your son live." Anna hesitated, her hands tightening on the folded cloth she carried. For a moment, fear filled her heart. What if he judged her? What if he thought less of her after seeing her poor house? Yet something in his eyes told her he was sincere. She lowered her head and said softly, "As you wish, sir." The next day, David's car stopped in the narrow streets of the old town. Children played barefoot near broken walls, women carried baskets from the market, and men sat on worn steps talking in low voices. The people looked with surprise as a sleek black car moved slowly through their street. Anna stood waiting outside her small house, nervous but steady. Sam ran forward, his face glowing. "You really came," he shouted. David stepped out of the car, dressed simply, without the usual shine of wealth. He looked around at the narrow lane, the cracked houses, and the laughter of children. It was a world far from his polished mansion. "Welcome, sir," Anna said, bowing slightly. Her cheeks burned with shame as she led him inside. The house was one room wide, with a small corner for cooking, a wooden table, and 2 chairs. A thin curtain divided the space where their beds lay. The walls were plain, and the air smelled faintly of soup. David stepped inside quietly. He looked around, not with disgust but with thought. He noticed how clean the place was, how every corner was cared for. On the wall, Sam's drawings were pinned, brightening the plain room. One showed a house with shining windows. Another showed a man, woman, and child holding hands. Sam rushed forward. "This is where Mama makes the soup I told you about. Sit, please. I will bring you water." David sat carefully on the wooden chair, which creaked under his weight. He looked at Anna as she placed a bowl of soup before him. It was simple vegetables and broth but served with care. "Please, sir," she said softly. "It is all I can offer." David tasted the soup. It was warm, gentle, and comforting in a way no fine meal in his mansion had ever been. He looked at Anna, then at Sam, and said, "This is the best meal I have had in years." Sam beamed proudly. "I told you, Mama makes the best soup." For a while, they talked. Sam showed him his small desk where he drew. David listened as the boy spoke of his dream to build tall towers and bridges one day. He asked questions, not as a master, but as a friend. Anna watched quietly. She had never seen her employer like this. He was always serious, distant, untouchable. Yet here he was, sitting in her tiny home, listening to her son with patience and warmth. As the evening drew on, David rose to leave. At the door, he turned to Anna. "You have little in your hands, but much in your heart. This house is small, but it feels alive. That is something my mansion has never known." Anna lowered her eyes, her voice trembling. "Sir, I do not know what to say." David looked at her firmly. "Say nothing. Just know this: your honesty and your love for your child are worth more than all the gold I possess." When he returned to his mansion that night, he felt unsettled. His grand halls now seemed emptier than before. He walked through the rooms, hearing only silence. He thought of Sam's laughter, of Anna's soup, of the little home filled with warmth despite its poverty. He sat in his study, the drawing still in his pocket. For years, he had tested people to see if they were loyal or greedy. But now he wondered if he had been the one failing the test of life. The next morning, David made a decision. He called Anna to his study. She stood nervously, unsure of why she had been summoned. "I want you to know," David said slowly, "that from this day forward, you and your son will not struggle. I will provide for Sam's education. He will go to the best school. And I will see that you no longer work late into the night." Anna's hands trembled. "Sir, I cannot accept such kindness. I only wished for honest work." David's gaze was steady. "And you have given it? More than that, you have given me something greater. You have reminded me what it means to be human." Tears filled Anna's eyes. She bowed deeply. "Thank you, sir. I will never forget this." That evening, as David walked through the mansion, he felt a change inside himself. The walls no longer felt like prisons. He knew now that a home was not built from marble or gold, but from trust, kindness, and love. And for the first time, he wondered if this maid and her son had not only changed his heart but also his future. The days that followed brought quiet changes to the mansion. The staff, who once moved like shadows in the halls, now carried a lighter spirit. They noticed their master smiling more often, something they had not seen in years. Some whispered that the maid and her son had softened him, though none dared say it aloud in front of him. David himself felt the change. He spent less time buried in reports and more time walking in the garden or sitting in the library where Sam flipped through books with shining eyes. He began to look forward to Anna's steady presence. She never sought attention, never asked for more than her work required, yet her honesty made his mansion feel alive. One evening, as the staff finished their duties, David overheard two servants whispering in the corridor. "Have you noticed, the master spends much time with the maid and her boy?" one said. "Yes," another replied. "Some think it is strange. But maybe it is good. The boy brings laughter." David paused, then continued walking without a word. He did not scold them, for their whispers carried no harm. Instead, he found himself thinking about how others viewed his bond with Anna and Sam. Once, he might have cared about appearances. Now, it seemed unimportant. That same week, Anna faced her own worry. Some neighbors in the old town had begun to talk. They saw the fine car that sometimes stopped near her house, and they wondered why the master of the mansion would visit a poor maid's home. One woman muttered, "Do not trust rich men. They never give without wanting something in return." Anna ignored the gossip, but deep inside, fear stirred. She worried that people might think badly of her or that the master's kindness would one day vanish like a passing wind. Still, when she looked at her son's bright face as he spoke of his new school books, her heart told her to trust. One Saturday, David invited Anna and Sam to the mansion's dining hall for a special meal. The long table, usually filled with silence, now carried laughter as Sam spoke of his drawings and his dreams. Anna sat quietly, her hands folded, but her eyes often rested on her son with pride. At one point, David asked Sam, "If you could build anything, what would it be?" The boy thought for a moment, then said, "I would build a house big enough for everyone who has no home. It would be full of food and books, so no child would be sad." David's throat tightened at the simple yet powerful answer. He looked at Anna, who lowered her eyes humbly, but he saw the shine of tears. That night, when Anna tucked Sam into bed back at their little house, the boy whispered, "Mama, do you think the master is lonely?" Anna brushed his hair gently. "Perhaps he was, but not anymore. You have given him company. And you too, Mama," Sam added sleepily. "You take care of him like you take care of me." Her heart grew heavy at those words. She had never thought of herself as important beyond her duties, yet her child spoke as though she carried light for both men. Meanwhile, in the mansion, David sat in his study staring at the drawings Sam had given him. His thoughts wandered to Anna. He remembered the first night he had pretended to sleep, expecting her to betray his trust, only to hear her prayers instead. He remembered the soup she served in her small home, the taste of comfort that money could not buy. For years, he had lived behind walls of wealth, trusting no one. Yet this maid, with nothing but honesty, had broken through those walls. The following morning, David met Anna in the garden. She was trimming flowers for the dining room, her hands steady despite the thorns. "Anna," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir." "I want you to know something," he said. "I have watched people for many years. Most came near me for wealth or power. But you never asked for anything. You worked with humility, and you gave more than I deserved. You have taught me that kindness is stronger than gold." Anna lowered her eyes, her cheeks warming. "Sir, I only did what was right." He studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps. But what is right is often rare. And rare things are precious." Anna's heart beat faster at his words, though she did not fully understand why. She bowed her head. "Thank you, sir." As he walked away, David knew his life had shifted. The walls of his mansion no longer felt like a prison, but they still echoed with silence when Anna and her son were gone. He began to realize that his test of the maid had turned into something greater, an awakening of his own soul. The whispers in the mansion continued, and the gossip in the old town grew, but none of it mattered to him now. What mattered was simple: a maid's honesty, a boy's laughter, and a bond that was beginning to shape a new future. And though David did not yet know it, the final test of his heart was still to come. The weeks passed, and life around the mansion kept changing. The once cold halls now felt warmer. Flowers bloomed brighter in the garden, laughter echoed more often, and even the staff walked with lighter steps. The reason was clear to all. The maid and her son had brought life where silence once lived. David knew this truth well. Each morning, he looked forward to Sam's cheerful greetings and Anna's calm presence. They had become part of his days, almost like family. But deep in his heart, David still feared one thing. He feared that the happiness he had found might slip away if fate turned cruel. One stormy evening, that fear was tested. Rain poured heavily, and strong winds rattled the windows. David sat in his study, reading reports, when his phone rang. It was a call from the hospital. They told him that Anna had been brought there after collapsing on her way home from the market. Shock froze his hands. Without a thought, he rushed out, his driver barely keeping up with his urgency. When David reached the hospital, he found Sam sitting on a bench, his small face pale and worried. The boy ran to him and clung to his arm. "Mama fainted," Sam whispered, his voice trembling. "She was so tired. She did not even eat properly because she gave me the last bread." David felt a weight press down on his chest. He had known Anna worked hard, but he had not realized how much she sacrificed in silence. The doctor explained, "She is weak from exhaustion and stress. She needs rest, good food, and less burden. Otherwise, her health will suffer again." David walked into the quiet hospital room. Anna lay there, her face pale but peaceful in sleep. For a long moment, he simply stood, remembering every detail: the way she worked without complaint, the way she prayed for her son, the way she gave without asking. In that moment, David understood something he had never admitted before. Anna was not just a maid in his house. She was the one who had taught him trust, kindness, and love without demanding anything in return. When Anna woke, she found David sitting beside her bed. His usual stern face was softened by worry. "Sir," she whispered weakly, trying to sit up. "I am sorry. I did not mean to trouble you." "Anna," he said firmly, placing a hand gently on hers. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I should be the one apologizing. I saw your honesty, your sacrifice, and yet I did not realize how much you carried on your shoulders. From today, you will not face these burdens alone." Tears filled her eyes. She shook her head softly. "You have already done so much, sir. You gave my son a chance for a better life. That is enough." David's voice grew steadier. "No, Anna. It is not enough. You and your son are not just guests in my life. You are part of it. I thought I was testing you, but it was I who was being tested. And you showed me what truly matters." Anna's lips trembled, but she said nothing, only lowered her gaze as tears slipped down her cheeks. That night, David made a choice. He arranged for Anna and Sam to move into the mansion, not as servants but as family. The staff were surprised, some even shocked, but no one dared question him. They all knew why. The master's life had been changed by the very people he once looked down upon. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers around the mansion faded. The town gossip also grew quiet when they saw how Anna walked with dignity and how Sam thrived in his new school. people began to respect what they once doubted. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, David sat in the garden with Anna and Sam. The boy was busy chasing butterflies while Anna arranged flowers in a small vase. David watched them with a quiet smile. "Anna," he said softly. She looked up, a question in her eyes. "You once prayed for your son to have a better future. I promise you, that future will be bright. But I also wish something else. I wish you to stay here, beside me, not as a worker but as someone I can trust for life." Her heart beat fast at his words. She lowered her gaze. "Sir, I do not know if I am worthy of such trust." David shook his head gently. "You are the only one truly worthy. You gave without asking. You cared without reason. That is worth more than any treasure I own." For a moment, silence filled the garden. Then Anna nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. From that day forward, the mansion was no longer just a place of wealth. It became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and trust. The man who once lived in loneliness found a family. The maid who once struggled alone found respect and peace. And the boy who once prayed for a simple life found a future brighter than he had ever dreamed. The test was over, but the lesson remained. True worth is not measured by riches or status. It is measured by honesty, sacrifice, and love. And in the heart of a once cold billionaire, those treasures finally found their place.